board meeting this summer, and I saw the number of tear-down requests. I was just startled. And you drive around the town and you see a town start to change. Someone described Glen Ellen now with all the tear-downs as a tract housing development. And those of you that know Glen Ellen and know how beautiful it is, that's very frightening, was. So I started talking to our board and our special treasurer that we have on our board, Art Miller, about the ranch house and the significance of the ranch house. And the fact that there are many architectural styles that we need to preserve and save as part of preservation, because it's part of our history. Not only part of our history, it's part of our neighborhoods, the look of our neighborhoods, and the frightening thing is what is coming in its place. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Art Miller, who tonight will talk about the 40s to 60s ranch houses. Art is the archivist and librarian for special collections at Lake Forest College. And Art is leaving now as I introduce him. Art's put a lot of work into this. I believe Pauline Moore has helped too with taking photos of some of the treasures we have that are ranch houses in Lake Forest. Thank you.
Thank you. I just didn't want to turn out the lights before I did a little talking to begin with. I'm going to try to do this in two different phases of slides, and I have just one tray of slides. They'll go a little slower in the first part, where I give, what I'm really going to do is talk about the story of the ranch house. The first part of it being the plan of the ranch house and its origins, and this being the open plan. And then second, talk about different styles of ranch houses, the neo-prairie or Wrightian or arts and crafts style, then the European or international style, and then also the different historical styles that show up in ranch houses, including the California ranch. The ranch house, the California ranch is really a subset of the larger picture of the ranch house, the post-World War II California ranch. After going through some of that and orientating us all to it, then I'm going to do a survey of what Lake Forest's really unique range of the uses of this style, of this ranch or neo-prairie style here in our community. First, you have to visualize our community, which is a little different along the North Shore than other communities. If you go up Waukegan Road, you go through places, one tier back from the lake, you have places like Skokie, Glenview, Northfield, Deerfield, and when you get to Lake Forest, you're still in Lake Forest. Even if you go north, you come to Knollwood. So in Lake Forest, you're still in Lake Forest. And that's very interesting because you have two different kind of characters of landscape. The east side, and we all know the Continental Divide goes down Green Bay Road, but the east side with its, it does. They used to be the St. Lawrence system going toward Lake Michigan, and then the Gulf and the Mississippi system going on the west. Now when they changed the river in around 1900, it altered that, but basically on the west we then have a rolling kind of landscape which is very different than the ravined and bluff east side landscape. So you have two different things going on in town, and this is reflected some in the kinds of housing that have developed. On the east side we have east side estate infill that happened after Franklin Delano Roosevelt's 1933 income tax increase to 90%. And then estates were subdivided, and then certain kinds of houses in a Beaux-Arts respect for hierarchy of form and harmony, very low houses were built there. Then also there were support community houses where there was infill of ranch houses in those neighborhoods. And then also on the south and west sides were the open spaces and the rolling terrain, which I think is fairly striking. We'll see a little of that in the slides. It's more rolling than we're really aware of, and a lot of times you'll have split levels that fit into this kind of, or tri-levels or whatever term, that fit into it, but are still part of that ranch idea. Then I'm going to give a final word on the open plan, talking about some of the renovations to the old east side places that we know of, and some of the issues that brings up that that we have houses where the open plan is being put onto the old historic formal plan, and so you have both. And so a lot of the development that's gone on around in the old neighborhoods of houses is where people are putting the some of the implementing some of the Frank Lloyd Wright type ideas from 100 years ago, and putting them onto houses today, so that you have both the old formal plan and the new open plan. So the label of the ranch house is a pretty complicated term. We won't take too long, but I'll show you some slides now that I think make that clear. Let me see if I can get my slides rolling. Oh, we won't turn out the lights yet. Now. So this is going pretty far back. This is going back to 1858. And this is a picture of Isolt by William Morris in 1858. He's the painted it. And William Morris led a movement, or pre-Raphaelites and what of painters who were looking at reforming life, the Industrial Revolution. Charles Dickens wrote the book Hard Times about the problems of all the difficulties that come in industrial life, and how it made a mess of everything, the landscape and the air, and people's lifestyles. So they were starting to redo that. And if you look at this interesting picture, you'll see there's kind of a messy bed. There's a book open, kind of a medieval style book open, and food next to it, and a very informal kind of idea. So he thought he'd do that in his own house. This is his red house built in Kent, southeastern London. And this was designed by Philip Webb in 1859. Now this looks a little bit like some things we have in Lake Forest. Red brick, notice the slope of the roof, notice the little wellhead with a tower on it. The style of this is related to, Howard Shaw picked up a lot on this. Okay, 1894, before Shaw hit Lake Forest, he built Ragdale in 1897-98. 1894, this appeared in a periodical called The Studio, which people also got in this country. This is M.H. Bailey Scott's a house that he designed. And look at the plan of this house. Now, first off, there's a lateral hallway, like at Ragdale. You can see the style of it is kind of Old Englishy, you know, OLDE Englishy, you know, which we would see cropping up in Lake Forest. But there's a lateral gallery or hall there. And then behind it are 3 public rooms, which is different than Ragdale. But the very interesting thing about the 3 public rooms is at the top of that plan, you'll see that those are folding screens. And so the hall, which was the main room, and then the dining room on the right, in the center is the hall, the dining room on the right, and the living room on the left, you could pull the screens back so that you had one big room. Now this is the beginning of the open plan, 1894. This is M.H. Bailey Scott published a book. He was an architect like Voysey and Norman Shaw in England, a part of the group who followed up on William Morris's ideas and John Ruskin's ideas about reform of the house. And this is, oh good, thank you, because it's not focused there, right? There we go, good. Now this will remind some people a little bit of like the Ragdale living room, because there's an ingle nook around a fireplace there on the right. In the back there is a dining L, or a little nook, another dining nook. So this book, this comes from a 1906 book, Gardens and Houses by M.H. Bailey Scott, where he, and this book was with these nice color renderings. Here's another hall, 2 stories. Looks something like, a little bit like the Deer Path Inn, a little bit like the dining hall at Lake Forest College, some of those kind of features. But again, you've got, in this case, in the right, you have a little dining nook, and then a fireplace kind of cluster there in the center. And then you can see above there are little windows looking down, and if you next time you're in the big room at the Deer Path Inn, look at the little windows where you look down into the main room. Very similar arts and craftsy style. Now, this house is in that same book, 1906, the house with the purple shutters, M.H. Bailey Scott. Notice the garden wall in front, or the wall at the street, and then the kind of shrubs around it, and then the shutters, and then the windows going right up to the roof line. So this is in England, but remember that shape. Imprint that shape in your mind because we're going to see it again and again. Okay, here's the plan of that house, and you'll see the big room up in the middle, and then also there's up at the upper right-hand corner of that there's kind of like a porch area that leads out into. But there's a reception room again that can kind of fold off. They used kind of curtains to draw across rooms to divide things in those days. Oh, one more thing I'll say about that. Notice that over on the right, lower right part of the picture, it's kind of separated off, but there's servants' quarters. And we'll notice that up until almost World War II, people planned, and of course that's before you had Bendix and dishwashers and things, people planned to have room for middle-class houses to have a room for places for servants to work and also to live. Then on the left are the family bedrooms. And this is another picture, not in color, but it's of that particular room, the little rendering that's in there of that particular house. So, okay, this country, jumping across to Chicago. Frank Lloyd Wright grew up in Wisconsin, came down to the city, worked for Louis Sullivan and Adler in the late 1880s, early 1890s. By 1900, the Ladies' Home Companion magazine had a series of different house plans, and here's a house plan that he did. Notice the open plan character of this, with the living room, then the dining on the bottom, and then the dining room over on the left. Also the links to the landscape, and there's a garden up above. So this is Frank Lloyd Wright, 1900. This isn't a house near us or anything, but it was in a magazine in 1900. So there was a lot of this reform going on about how to reorganize your life, to reintegrate your life out of the little Victorian rooms where you had a morning room and a breakfast room and a dining room and a study, and there were all these little compartments that kind of like a little rabbit warren, and they were opening that up to reintegrate family life, which was very segmented before that. Now we're in Chicago, definitely. On the left, if you drive down Sheridan Road into Highland Park, you see the Willits House, 1901. And you can see the plan of the Willits House if you squint in the back on the lower left. And it's very much the same as that one we just saw. On the right is a very interesting plan, 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. On the wooded aisle, the Japanese exhibit in a little tea house. And notice the open plan and how similar that is to Wright's Willett House plan, flowing from the space all flowing together. So that was now Japanesism and all were also prominent in Europe at that time, but this was very important for Wright, and see the similarity even of the style of the architecture. Okay, 1907, I think this is called the Gimbel House. We're standing on a little bridge here on Sheridan Road, and you can see this still from the road. It's a little ranch house on the ravine in Glencoe, if you drive down the road. And you can see the same roof pitch and kind of relationship to the windows almost as in the House of the Purple Shutters that we saw earlier. Now this is a very interesting house. Shirley Paddock is here. Shirley found recently a book, a German book by a guy named Helmut Richter that I haven't been able to find another copy of in this country, Library of Congress or on the national databases and things. But this was done in the 30s, which is a complex period, but this is a 1931 house before Hitler. But look at how there's the angle, like the House of the Purple Shutters, the kind of hipped roof, and then the windows over on the right that show the big tall windows that are opening out onto onto this interesting landscape, rolling landscape again. This is a little about the same time, 1930. This is Mies van der Rohe, somebody else whose history would be tied up with Chicago. Mies van der Rohe built the Tugendhat House in Czechoslovakia. I'm a little vague on my Czechoslovakian geography to know exactly where this house is, but trust me. In the lower left, there is a map, a plan, which doesn't, I'm sure, show up at the back of the room very well, but it again has the open plan with a little dining area and living room, and it's all kind of flowing together in one room. So it's part of it. This is definitely a reform floor plan, and you can see the horizontal character of the house and the way it's situated on a high point of land. This is a 1933-34 Century of Progress exhibit. What was that, 40 years after the 1893 World's Fair? And in Lake Forest on Everett Road, there's a little cluster of 4 houses that are sort of steel houses. They're south of Everett, west of Waukegan. And there's a little cluster of these houses down there. This one, I think, gives some of the character, although it's very wooded around it, that these were these steel, horizontal, one-story houses, 1933-34. The Depression had happened. People were, just in general, after 40 years of one style, they were ready to change from the historical styles and things that had been prominent all that period, and there was a reaction and also wanting to use new materials. But in this case, steel. And there, I think the 4 are still there. This is Frank Lloyd Wright, who kind of disappeared about 1907 or 1908. His career sort of tanked. He did go over to Japan, did some things, but really came roaring back after the Depression with the very simple kinds of housing that he was advocating in the reaction to the Beaux-Arts period. And this is a 1936 house of his. It's pictured from a book called Tomorrow's House, which is in the back, that came out in 1946. By some architectural editors in this country, and had pictures of all different architects, but that's one. So his reputation came roaring back here. Architectural Forum, January of 1908. I have lots of people to thank. In this case, this is lent to me by Arthur Dubin of Highland Park, who is an architect, and his father was an architect in this period and built advanced style houses. And Arthur's own house on Park Avenue in Highland Park is a classic, almost textbook of this Tomorrow's House. And he pointed that source out to me, even though the college did own the book. Now this is a chapter from that book called The House Without a Name. And again, the pictures are going to be a little vague at the back, I apologize. But there is, first on the right-hand column, you'll see a kitchen and then a little kind of study room off to the right. But then to the left of the kitchen, down below, there's a great big room. They don't have a name for it, and it isn't exactly the living room that everybody knew from earlier, because they talk about putting up even a ping pong table in it. But it was, in 1946, the room didn't have a name yet. From that same book, this is a picture of a kitchen, and I'm sort of struck with how it's not that unlike a kitchen today. This is from the 30s. And it's a very crisp, clean-looking kitchen, which you would still be happy with, probably with little changes in the appliances maybe, but basically the plan is not that unusual. It's on the left of this picture, that same kitchen, just kind of a bar going through into this room where you see a dining kind of table in the back there, and then there's a fireplace over here with the natural brick showing and the chairs in front of the fireplace. This is very much the same idea of Bailey Scott again, but instead of having the servants separated out doing the kitchen work in the scullery, you have here the kitchen integrated into the whole plan. This is actually Arthur Dubin's father, Henry Dubin, did one of these places that was in this Tomorrow's House book, and this shows, again, a dining table with a bench, kind of an L from a living room, and notice the bricks, the natural materials coming through, which is the same idea as there were back in Bailey Scott, where he used a lot of timber, but here we have the bricks, again, but using natural materials, and right, of course, like this too. Now this is an interesting concept from that. This is storage, and on the right is a radio cabinet. They didn't even have TV yet in 1946, and the hairdo, some of us will remember, some of us won't. But here is storage all built in, and they had some other pictures in here that showed jumbled up attics and living rooms and full of lots of clunky Victorian furniture. So there was a reaction against that and lots of built-ins. This is from another book that came out in 1949, I think. Oh, no, 1940. This is 1940. Bertrand Goldberg building a house in Evanston. And this house is 2 stories, but it has very much open plan characteristics, bringing in ideas of Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, and I've got a couple of those books in the back to look at. And this is the plan of that house. You can see on the right the plan for the living room with a dining L and the kitchen over there and the fireplace, still the fireplace. So we're not that far from those reform ideas of the arts and crafts period back 50 years earlier. Now, to change geographical location to get to the ranch house. You've only been talking for 20 minutes, and you haven't heard the word ranch house yet. But here is an actual ranch house, 1824, San Diego, one of the early actual ranches. And this is in a book put out by Sunset, and some of us know that as an old publisher that did lots of, the Lane Publishing Company did lots of interesting books about how to do your house. We remember them. But this is one that came out again in that about 1946, 47 period, 46 I believe, with the assistance of the guy who invented the ranch house, Cliff May. Cliff May was a Californian, and he took these old historical ideas of plan and style and mixed them up in a salad, and here we can use I can make a pun with saying ranch dressing, and mixed them up all together with these international style English arts and crafts concepts and open plans, and also the relationship to the landscape. So here, for instance, is a house on a hillside, a little different, a little bit more of a hill than we have maybe here in Lake Forest, but there's the garden wall, just like in the Purple Shutters house. The roof is very similar to the Purple Shutters. The plan opens in the back onto a big courtyard. Here you'll notice the interesting international style windows that open up the views, floor-to-ceiling windows, open up these views out into the ranch side, countryside. And there you see the sort of Roy Rogers-y type fence there. You expect to see Trigger go by any minute. Now this is an interesting little point I wanted to make. Notice the I guess they call it batten and board and batten style. The Cliff May Sunset book shows that this goes back to the gold rush days when they wanted to slap things together pretty fast, and they would just kind of not worry about the seams. They just put the little batten over where the boards came together. But you'll notice this in a lot of houses around Lake Forest. Look for this when you drive around in certain in the sections where we have ranch houses in town, and see how they picked up that California style element. But this is from a California house. This is a ranch kitchen, again from the Cliff May Sunset book. Notice the tiles, the cathedral ceiling, the natural woods thing. The interesting stove in the back is kind of retro, but some of us will remember that. Others won't, of course. But there's a dining area behind that little thing. There's a music stand showing that you're going into the living area. This is very much influenced by at least Frank Lloyd Wright. Now, this is a Frank Lloyd Wright 1950 house. And notice again how you have the heavy varnished, natural colored wood roof. You've got the brick in the back, kind of in between the living rooms and the kitchen, and the dining room on the right. Lots of natural materials, lots of light, 1950. Now, this is a Lake Forest house, 1950. In the second career of Wright, after that came the Glore Place on Mayflower Road, across the street from Corinne Wood's house. And this is a very kind of simplified, very crisp, very attractive house on the ravine. This is a slide by a not very good photographer, but showing a little bit what it looks like from the ravine side. It's hard to get a good glimpse of it up close without a crane or something. Now this house, this is way out of context, but I have to explain. This is an autobiographical tidbit. This is the Levin House in Parkland Village, Kalamazoo, Michigan, 1948, completed in 1950. I grew up in the house that the Levins moved out of, which had a pitched roof. This house has a sloping roof, but the Levins and their beautiful grand piano never had a dry moment. I think they had a Wright student in about 1960 come along and completely redo the roof, and I think they probably bought a new piano after that. But they had a very soggy life. And of course, I was 7 in 1950, and my brother was 4, and we would giggle when our folks would drive us by because of the poor people who'd given up a perfectly sound, regular house to move into what we called a hippopotamus with its mouth open. Now, so Wright had impracticalities, but this is an interesting house that we have lots of background on, because this is the Susan Dart's house, the McCutcheon's house, built by Edward Dart, and we have great documentation about the planning of this house and the struggles between architects, even if it was Susan Dart's brother and the client. Dart wanted a flat roof. Susan and Jack insisted on a pitched roof. Now, this is a Wrightian-style house. It's out on open lands. The house is gone now, torn down several years ago, and replaced with a big shingle-style house. But this is a rambling house, and here's an, oops, no, I'm going the wrong way, sorry. Here's an interior shot of their house with the kitchen over on the left behind, then the dining table there. Notice the cathedral ceiling, the brick walls. This was just a really elegant house. There were some Howard Shaw andirons in the fireplace on the right, which you can't quite see there. But this was a very nice open plan, very handsome, elegant house that fit right into its landscape. Now, a different tone was on these also. This is also a Lake Forest house. I'm not sure where it is, but it was published in this Small Houses book, I think about 1949. And this is Jerome Cerny, who had been active from the 20s and built great big houses, and then moved down into the smaller scale houses of post-war, post-Franklin Roosevelt income tax scale. But this is a very kind of classic New England style salt box type house. Notice the garage on the right with the Cerny garage door that's sort of camouflaged, so it's not in your face. This is the plan of that house, and I just mentioned it to show you this plan because on the lower part of the plan, the main floor, is a living room with a dining L and a big fireplace, and the kitchen is right nearby the dining L. Off to the right of the dining L and before you get to the garage is a dining porch, or what we call breezeway sometimes. But I think we have here a very open plan house with very traditional elements. Now, this you won't be able to see from the back, so I'll describe it, but it's a view of the living room on the top. There's a very traditional fireplace, almost Georgian fireplace on the lower left, and on the lower right is the dining L with built-ins, but the built-ins are very much in the style of the 20s, very kind of classic New England-y or something, but classic taste from English Georgian architecture. But there's the dining L behind it there, and with the built-ins, but just in a different style. This is a later Cerny house. By the 60s, he was doing houses, and this comes from a book that he actually put out as a promo, and it put a lot of magazine articles, and this has been published, but this is the Winter House here in Lake Forest. And this, interestingly enough, does not have a family room, or it's more of a conservative plan, but you'll notice this is interesting. It has, the entrance has wrought iron, that's kind of Cerny wrought iron, but there is kind of that ranchy looking gallery along the garage, which again is nicely camouflaged. Sorry this isn't bigger for you. This is in the east side of town. I know where this is. This is just west of 965 East Deer Path, the second Fairline house. This was built for Mrs. Marshall Field, and it's lovingly cared for still today, but it's a very classic style now, again, formal for a ranch house in East Lake Forest, next to a very significant, maybe one of the most significant houses in town, very large house, red brick. And so this is not to challenge it, but to be very low-keyed up next to it, close to it. This is on Pine Lane, the site of the former Edward Ryerson, Thorne, and Donnelly place that was torn down, I think probably, I imagine in the 50s. But notice this house, which there's a series of ranches. There's still along there an outbuilding from the place that's been made into a house. But this house, again, has that sort of same Bailey Scott plan, except for notice the big floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ravine. Across the ravine is the Edison Dick David Adler house. And so this house does not challenge that house across the ravine. Very nice. This house, actually today is owned by Lake Forest College and has a superior, so I have to be very nice about it, of mine living in it, the dean of faculty. But it's just to the west of the first Finley Barrel House by Shaw, which is, again, very much in the red house tradition. Has even little round windows, or it did until recently, little round windows that are from the red house over its garage. But this is a more formal style ranch, but again, notice that kind of gallery there from the ranch style, California style, in the formal setting. This is on Spruce. just west of Lake Road, on the south side of the street. There's a house with, again, this sort of purple house kind of form next to a two-story house that came in later. And that's what it looks like, actually. It's just snuggled in there, and I bet you that many people haven't even noticed this house, but it's there. It's not challenging any of the architecture around it. It's not too far from several classic homes. Right across the street is Harry T. Lindeberg's Dexter Cummings house, the very French formal style house. So this just kind of slips right in there, so we don't hardly, it's not in our face. That was kind of the east side scale. This is on the corner of Woodland. This is south of that Pine Lane, the southeast corner of Woodland and Sheridan Road. And notice how this house is on a very rolling site and fits along the crest of that winding place there. This is, again, just to the south also, southwest of the Edison Dick House, and west of also, at that time, an Edwin Hill Clark house for Harold Cornelius Smith, 1920s. This is on the Lake Forest College campus again, kind of kitty corner from that one I just showed that was college-owned. This is the president's house for Lake Forest College, built in 1960, Perkins and Will. And although there's a two-story part on the right, there's a big dining room behind those windows and then a garage over to the left. The landscape is by Franz Lipp and is still pretty much maintained. Adam Blumenthal, who did a thesis on Lake Forest architecture, dubbed this the Brady Bunch President's House. The college president now lives at 100 North Sheridan, which was is more of a kind of one of the kind of big houses in that part of town. This is another college house built in 1962, Perkins and Will. It is a duplex, a little tiny duplex for faculty members, which shows something about how much faculty were making in 1962. It's very small, but it also deals, and it's on the edge of the support neighborhood just to the south of it, and is compatible, totally compatible with houses in the old African American neighborhood that were rebuilt there, replacing some of the post emancipation houses. This is on my street, kind of across the street from where I live on Wildwood Road, but I want to show how, even in the support community, when they would insert a ranch-style house, it could be very contextually compatible. To the left of this picture is a red brick two-story house. That house on the left that you see is two-story is originally one-story. This is a one-story ranch-style house, and notice the hipped roof and how it relates very, in almost a sophisticated way, I think, with the house just to the right, and the roof pitches are very similar, but yet it does have a ranch character. This is a contrasting image. This is a house that's very similar to the one that was on the right in the last picture on the right here, but this is a more Wrightian, quote, self-referential, unquote, house next to it that isn't nearly as concerned about the context. This is on Washington Circle, not too far from Ryan Place. Nice house, but close to another house that's very different. Now this is a house that's very similar to that earlier Wrightian one we just saw. Again, a contrast. This is the Davies Place, built in the late 60s on Mayflower, a couple doors north of that Frank Lloyd Wright house we saw earlier. This is by Balfour Lanza, and it's a very nice house. It's on a big parcel of ground. It sits back from the road, so it is not at all in your face and fits into the landscape and into even the neighborhood context with the Wright house, and another one that's similar along there too. It's across the street from the lakeside. This is Foster Place. This is the former Wesley estate of Lewis F. Swift. Landscape was done. This is on the west side of Green Bay Road, across from Lake Forest Country Day School. And this is, again, we're going to run into the rolling terrain. Here's a big ranch-style house rambling along on this kind of rolling terrain. Here's just one more house along that Foster, but this is a more traditional style house, red brick, but again across from the remaining Shaw house of the Lewis Swift property. But these don't challenge the more significant and taller Shaw Place. This is Estate Lane, which is near another great big house in extreme southwest Lake Forest. And this is a ranch style way back from the street on Estate Lane. Open space. Notice the kind of tilt to the land again. It's not, the site is not flat, and it sits at kind of the crest of the site. This is not a good picture, I apologize, but this is the Keck and Keck around 1950 house for the Fagans. It's infill, but it's infill on the mill. It's south of Old Mill, and it was part of Lasker Estate also. And then that's since been re-infilled with Devonshire Lane, which goes through there. But this house still sits majestically up on its rise, very simply, very Wrightian, and it's a very elegant, simple house. Keck and Keck. This is in a different neighborhood. This is west, if you go west of Waukegan Road on Deer Path, north of the old entrance to the Melody Farms estate. There's a section that there's a lot of traditional style architecture, but a section of it is ranch homes. This shows how they work together along, I think, the street that parallels Waukegan Road to the west. And they're all just kind of in there very, well, they're not terribly assertive on each other. This is the backyards, I think shooting from a street farther north, back on that street, but it shows the backyards behind these houses. And you'll notice this nice ranch house and the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out on the garden. This is a simple house along that same street I was just kind of on, not too far away. Very simple, 50s-style ranch, but elegantly done. Tract houses would not have quite the simplicity that this does and the nice materials. This is a very nice little house. Similar in plan, and notice how that garage comes down to sort of connote that that's a lesser part of the house, and then the red brick and the formal with the fence in front, very traditional style house in that same area, part of town. This is farther north up Waukegan Road, and this is I think it's a former barn. I have to thank Pauline Moore for driving me around when I took these pictures. I think this is a former barn too, but it's very much a ranch, one-story style, or stable, if not a barn. Probably horses were there. And this is a different shot of it, but with a more recent house, I think, which is to the east of it, with the kind of horse fence there along the side. And I think that this is across the street or nearby, but if you notice on the gable, there's kind of a little half semicircular window up in the gable, and here that motif is repeated. Again, it's a very formal house, but red brick in this case. Here's in the same neighborhood. This is going back a little bit to the right and to Bailey Scott. It's hard to see in my photograph, I apologize, but the porch has the same kind of timbering that you saw back in those pictures of 100 years ago. But the roof is very much, and the windows, fenestration is reminiscent of that purple house, with a house with purple shutters. This is up in the Knollwood Club on the south part of the driveway, and this is a house that has California and traditional elements. There's an angle there. There's verticality and horizontality, but it fits nicely, slips right into the space. This is a little bit, I think, a later house, probably from the 60s, and it's got more kinds of materials going on and more international style features to it. Now, speaking of the international style, if you go to south of the Wesley Estate in that area, and then a little bit further east toward the railroad tracks, kind of kitty corner from the railroad tracks and Wesley Road from Barra College, there's the Whispering Folks subdivision, and here we have an interesting range of things on landscape that is much more rolling than I expected. Now, this is an international style house with a kind of Wrightian and kind of it's a split level, but interesting. Now, there's a group of these, and I can't show enough pictures to show how this all is out here, but this is another one. This is a flat-roofed house. There's enough of those that there really is a context of those houses in that neighborhood. There's quite a bit of it. Now, this one is just one I like. It's near Beverly, just south of Wesley Road, I think. But I love the way that playfully, just sort of that roof piece kind of just goes down to the ground there. I don't know who got the idea, but it just kind of appeared on somebody's drawing board, I think. Oh, was that to stop the leaks? Oh, my goodness. So that's a redo. Interesting. Oh, okay. But again, there's kind of, there's some non-traditional shapes in this neighborhood, and yet they don't seem to be jarring. They seem to fit the context. There's a critical mass of this kind of interesting stuff in that neighborhood to make it work. Here's the very traditional house, again, in that same neighborhood. And notice again how it's a little bit irregular there, the landscape. I mean, the terrain, not that the plants are funny. Here's one showing those kind of Cerny-like masked garage doors in a very formal kind of a plan. Now, I'm going to change gears again. A gentleman who can't be here, I don't think, tonight because of the snow we had, is the 90-some-year-old Dwayne Dickey, who was an architect with General Builders, had worked with Charles Yost, an architect down in no man's land, designing houses after World War II, and hooked up with General Builders and with the Kendlers, and did a lot of work with Villa Turicum and with also with the beginning of the Ponds, I believe. He retired, I think, after the Ponds got going, but some of his plans are in there also. Now this house I just bring in, this is the Illinois plan that he had in that period. And these plans date from about 1960 to 1980. But notice again the tie-ins with the earlier, going all the way back to M.H. Bailey Scott, but also with Wright ideas. Here's another one called the Rockford, I believe. Now, I just threw this back in here from Shirley's, the book Shirley found from Germany. This is a 1931 house outside of Berlin, where the Germans were very open to the English ideas and to Wright's ideas. And so they played with these roof plans. And so this was a little bit earlier. Mr. Dickey studied architecture at the University of Minnesota in the early 30s, which you wouldn't think was a good time, but one guy who needed the money for the gig was Frank Lloyd Wright, who gave lectures on architecture there while he was studying at the University of Minnesota. So he actually did study with Wright. This is a dark picture of another house in there, but it's in Villa Turicum. But you notice again the kind of patterns on that gallery are very much like the 100 years ago in England, the ones they were using, and the natural materials of the roof and and the dormers. It's not a ranch style exactly, but it is a house that tries to seem low. This is a very formal one of those plans that was done by Dickey, and picking up on the more formal elements. And here shows, again, one that's very reminiscent of that earlier form that we saw in Germany and in Wright and in down in Glencoe, and then also over in England with Bailey Scott. Here it is in the 1960s or 70s right here in Villa Turicum. Now this is the last one I have pictures of that I'm going to talk about here. Now this is at one of his houses that I think it's the Rustic House. I have to thank Ron White for these slides. He did the slides of the architectural drawings, and our member Ron White from Winnetka, architectural drawings, and then the photographs also. But this is a house that was built in there. It reminds me a little bit of the form of the Edison Dick house with the off-center entry. And the pediment above. This is another view of it that shows off to the left. And toward the garage wing, it takes on more ranch-style characteristics with the informal landscape too. That's in Villa Turicum. I'm not sure of the exact address, but it's in Villa Turicum. Maybe somebody else knows where this house is. Oh, Lock Lane. Okay, great. Now this is the plan, and this is my last slide, and I'm going to talk a little bit after this. We're not all over with, but this just shows that in that same house on Lock Lane, the open plan. Up at the top is, and kind of open to the hallway, is the living room with a dining L. Then there is the kitchen over there to the right, going out toward a porch, I believe. And then on the lower part, in the center, is the family room with the big fireplace, and it's really bigger almost than the living room space. So I'm just ending up with how over almost a century of time this plan came and established itself, and even with traditional looking house, a very traditional looking house, you have this modern plan. Now, what I don't have slides for, and so we can turn on the lights, actually. Can you get those, Susan? Thank you. Good. Just wanted to, as kind of a coda, I want to talk about what I think is an interesting thing about how understanding what's going on with East Lake Forest and some of the big older houses. They were very formal houses, and they tended to be built with lots of the little rooms in the kind of Victorian way, but in a more formal way. It was not, I wouldn't say, no, it's not Victorian, but it would be in the Beaux-Arts kind of European, almost palace style that Edith Wharton advocated in her book, The Decoration of Houses, I think about 1898, for instance. And the big formal rooms. Those houses have been preserved, lovingly restored, but almost always, and we can all think of our own examples of this, they end up with a ranch-style aspect of it. In the big houses, kitchen spaces are reconfigured to have a family room or room with no name or whatever adjacent to the kitchen. And this is very typical. Some I'll just mention quickly. Charles S. Frost, 1897, Eastover at the corner of Wesley and I think, not Crabtree, Elmtree. Just to the west of that is his same year Westover, and that renovation with its same kind of kitchen that's just been recently finished and went through our boards and what was by John Vinci, the architect in Chicago, preservation architect. The Edison Dick House, which was built in 1932 and for a long time was in the original family, when it recently changed, again, a big open kitchen was created, and it's almost an imperative that's presented usually by the distaff side of the house that this be done to make the open plan, so that they have both styles of houses in one. One I'll mention just modestly as I go through is the work Dan Sutherland did for the Miller House on Wildwood Road, where it's very much like a Bailey Scott hall adjacent to the kitchen. But people are putting these, and mine is a little vernacular style bungalow cottage. So, but with more lots of little rooms in the main part of the house, but with the open plan in the back now. Our own Dave Schock, who's on our board, lives on Washington Circle, and Lynn Knudsen, a former member of this house, worked with them in designing their Wrightian open plan in the back of that house. Audrey Vanderway on Wildwood also had one of these houses. 2000 Knollwood, a very formal, a French house with one of our members that lived in, Robert lives in it now, Walcott and Work 1929 house, had a den put on later, adjacent, not too far from down the hall from the kitchen. Across the road from that at 2001 Knollwood, Hugh Garden House for 1929. There was an addition made by Traditional Concepts there. Traditional Concepts also did, I think it's 487 Walnut, the old McClure place by Charles Frost, or Cobbin Frost in 1887. And both the Poulton Porch and the Traditional Concepts addition to the family room do kind of very much change the character of the simplicity of that old house. But there's always this drive to have that kind of addition put on. The last and 10th of these in this little litany that I'll mention of ones that have been done is the Ravello at the 1960 built Ravello on Bluffs Edge Road. And this was built in 1960 by Lydia Lee and her son, an architect. Infill house on the bluff of the Cyrus McCormick Walden estate. But they put on a compatible family room addition on that house after they bought it from Mrs. Lee. And these are still going, this is an ongoing discussion. Lots of streets in East Lake Forest are coping with these issues. Some places there have been lots of additions granted, and you should drive along the streets. Even short streets, you'll see it. One that's up for discussion currently is 885 East Maplewood at the corner of Maple Court. And this is an architecturally significant house, which right now people are trying to figure out how to help the family be able to create an open plan space like we're talking about, adjacent to a very formal, great big, almost medieval hall that they have, which isn't really great for watching TV. But there are problems with, it was stuck on trying to sort out the issues about the garage and fitting it into the context of that. So the ranch house, there are different aspects of it, but the plan and the style are two different things. The plan of the ranch house is something that a lot of people in this room grew up with and knew. And so even if you buy the other kind of older historical house, you want that kind of a plan in your place. So that just brings us up to the current kinds of issues that we have. Also, we have this wonderful character around town of rolling. Notice how rolling the landscape is when you go around in other parts of town where these ranch houses are, and how they relate to the character of the landscape as it adjusts, sometimes inside the house adjusts to those changes. So these are interesting places. I hope I haven't confused you too much, making this sound too complex, but trying to show that it's a rich heritage that involves both style and it involves the plans that we live with and how we lived in these houses, old and new, and that it's an important part of our heritage that's probably as predominant as any style in the community. So, thank you very much. I'm sorry that we're tight in here, but there's over in the back there are some books on the table, including, even though Mr. Dickey couldn't be here, some of his plans that you can leaf through. Anybody here that knows Villa Turicum or the ponds might want to browse through and see if you recognize some of the houses. So, thank you.
Thank you. We want to announce the upcoming programs.
Upcoming programs. Help me. March program is the next program, the 21st of March, another Thursday night. And this will be a very interesting program on teardowns. We'll have guest speakers. I think we're maybe going to have to break out of this space. Guest speakers, one from Glencoe, Ellen Schubart, who was here, fall of 2000 when we had the visit from Landmark Preservation of Illinois, was very active in that. She was Sensible Growth in Chicago. That's on March 21st. Also, Jean Follett from Hinsdale, and they've certainly had experience with teardowns there. So between Glencoe and Hinsdale, I think they'll have interesting things to say. And it's a very good program that they've done before, and members here have heard it. Blair Kamen on April 14th. Blair Kamen of the Chicago Tribune, who has a new book that's I've seen it at the Lake Forest bookstore. Excellent book about architecture and some of the values that we talk about in our meetings. He'll be speaking to us and probably can have his arm twisted to sign a book or two. But that'll be very good. And that gets us a little bit ahead, right? Okay, good. Thanks so much.